How far would you go if your own family treated you like a wallet and thought you were too weak to fight back? Standing in the mall bathroom, my son whispered a warning that changed everything. When my wife and her mother came home that night, they never expected to find me waiting, with all their secrets, receipts, and a plan they couldn't escape. The direct deposit notification lit up my phone at exactly 3:47 p.m. on that Tuesday afternoon. Another paycheck, another opportunity to provide for my family. I stared at the number on the screen, $3,200 after taxes, and immediately began calculating. Jamie needed new shoes. His current pair had holes that even duct tape couldn't fix anymore. I'd been promising him that shopping trip for weeks, and the guilt was eating at me. There was also his college fund, sitting pathetically low in our savings account. Every dollar I could squeeze away now would compound over the next 11 years. I walked through our apartment's front door that evening with genuine excitement, something that had become increasingly rare. The living room was its usual organized chaos, Monica's fashion magazines scattered across the coffee table, Delores' oversized purse claiming half the couch like a territorial marker. The two women looked up from their conversation, and I noticed how quickly their expressions shifted from animated to merely polite. "Ethan, perfect timing," Monica said, her voice carrying that particular tone she used when she wanted something. At 33, my wife still had the ability to make her requests sound like favors she was doing for me. "Mom and I were just talking about something important." Delores Franklin, Monica's 55-year-old mother, adjusted her position on our couch with the practiced authority of someone who considered our home an extension of her own. Her silver hair was perfectly styled, despite it being a weekday evening, and her jewelry caught the lamplight as she nodded gravely. "It's about Monica's health, Ethan," Delores said, her voice dropping to that concerned whisper people use in hospital waiting rooms. "She's been having some female issues. You know how delicate these things can be." I felt my excitement about the paycheck deflate slightly, but concern for Monica immediately took its place. "What kind of issues? Are you okay?" Monica's hand went to her stomach in a gesture that seemed almost rehearsed. "It's probably nothing serious, but Dr. Kellerman wants me to get some specialized tests done, the kind that insurance doesn't fully cover, you know? It's going to be expensive, but we can't take chances with women's health." "Of course not," I said immediately. "How expensive are we talking?" "The tests are around $2,000, Monica said, not quite meeting my eyes. "Maybe a little more with all the lab work. I know it's a lot, but Delores thinks—" "I think," Delores interrupted, her voice gaining that edge she used whenever she felt I wasn't responding quickly enough, "that a husband who truly cares about his wife's health wouldn't hesitate. These aren't the kinds of things you postpone, Ethan. Women's reproductive health is nothing to gamble with." The way she said my name always made me feel like I was being scolded by a principal. I looked at Monica, searching her face for signs of real worry or pain, but she seemed more anxious about my response than about any medical condition. "When do you need the money?" I asked. "Tomorrow morning," Monica said quickly. "Dr. Kellerman had a cancellation, and he can fit me in if we can confirm payment tonight." I pulled out my wallet, the leather worn smooth from years of this exact routine, the credit cards, the emergency cash, the bank card. All of it felt heavy in my hands. Jamie's shoes would have to wait another month. His college fund would remain stagnant. "Here," I said, handing Monica my bank card and the cash from my wallet. "The PIN is still the same. Take whatever you need." Monica's relief was immediate and visible, but it was Delores' satisfied smile that stuck with me. She patted Monica's hand and said, "See? I told you he'd understand. Ethan knows how to take care of his family." They returned to their conversation almost immediately, their voices dropping back into that intimate mother-daughter tone that somehow made me feel like an intruder in my own living room. I stood there for a moment, waiting for a thank you or even acknowledgement, but they were already deep into discussing something about weekend plans. The next day at work, Patrice Henson noticed my mood immediately. At 36, she had the kind of practical wisdom that came from raising 3 kids as a single mother while maintaining a full-time career in technical support. We'd worked in adjacent cubicles for 4 years, and she'd become adept at reading my expressions. "You look like someone stole your lunch money," she said during our coffee break, settling into the chair across from me in the break room. "Just family stuff," I said, stirring my coffee with more attention than it required. "Monica or Delores?" Patrice asked with the directness that made her both an excellent troubleshooter and an uncomfortable friend to lie to. "Both, I guess. Monica needed money for some medical tests. It's fine. Just threw off my budget planning." Patrice studied my face with the same intensity she brought to diagnosing software problems. "Ethan, can I ask you something? And I want you to really think about your answer." "Sure." "When was the last time Monica thanked you for anything?" The question hit me like a diagnosis I wasn't ready to hear. I opened my mouth to respond with an automatic defense, but no specific memory came to mind. Instead, I found myself thinking about the way Monica and Delores had seamlessly moved on to other topics the moment they had what they wanted. "She doesn't need to thank me," I said finally. "We're married. It's what you do." Patrice nodded slowly, but her expression suggested she'd heard exactly what she expected to hear. "Right. And when was the last time she asked how you were doing? About your day, your feelings, your plans?" I checked my phone, partly to avoid Patrice's knowing look and partly out of habit. There was a bank alert notification, a cash withdrawal for $400 at 10:23 a.m. I frowned. Monica's appointment wasn't until the afternoon, and the withdrawal was from an ATM at the Riverside Mall, not anywhere near Dr. Kellerman's office. "Hey, everything okay?" Patrice asked. "Yeah," I said, closing the notification, just checking the time. But as we walked back to our desks, I couldn't shake the image of that ATM location. The Riverside Mall was where Monica and Delores spent their girls' days, browsing boutiques and trying on clothes they claimed were just for fun. The timing felt wrong, but I pushed the thought away. Monica's health was more important than my paranoid suspicions. That evening, I arrived home to find Monica and Delores in Monica's bedroom with the door mostly closed. Their voices carried through the thin walls of our apartment, punctuated by occasional laughter that sounded more celebratory than relieved. I caught fragments of their conversation as I prepared dinner. Words like perfect timing and he never suspects anything and that boutique had the best sale. I stood in the kitchen, holding a wooden spoon and straining to hear more clearly, but the words remained frustratingly incomplete. When Monica emerged 20 minutes later, she looked refreshed and energetic, not like someone who'd spent the day dealing with medical concerns. "How did the appointment go?" I asked. "Oh, fine," she said with a wave of her hand. "Dr. Kellerman said the tests will take a few days to process. Nothing to worry about right now." "That's good news," I said, studying her face. "You seem to be feeling better." "Much better," she agreed, already moving toward the living room where Delores was gathering her things. "Mom and I are going to grab dinner out. Don't wait up." They left together, Monica's laughter echoing in the hallway long after our apartment door closed. I stood in our kitchen, surrounded by the ingredients for a family dinner that would apparently be eaten alone, and opened my banking app. The transactions were all there. The $2,000 withdrawal at 9:15 a.m., the $400 cash withdrawal at 10:23 a.m., and a series of smaller card transactions throughout the day. Nordstrom, $347. Sephora, $89. A boutique I'd never heard of, $156. Another store, $203. I stared at the screen until the numbers blurred together. Each transaction was time-stamped, creating a timeline that had nothing to do with medical appointments and everything to do with a shopping spree. The evidence was right there in black and white, but accepting what it meant felt like stepping off a cliff. My phone buzzed with a text from Monica. "Having so much fun with Mom. Don't wait up." I set the phone down and walked to our bedroom, where I noticed Monica's closet door was slightly ajar. Inside, I could see shopping bags, expensive ones with rope handles and embossed logos. They were tucked behind her hanging clothes, but not well enough to be completely hidden. That night, I lay in bed listening to Monica's breathing and thinking about Patrice's questions. When was the last time Monica had thanked me? When had she last asked about my day? When had I stopped being a husband and become just a source of funding? The answers to those questions felt dangerous, like doors I wasn't ready to open. But as I stared at the ceiling, one thought kept circling back. Tomorrow was Saturday, and I'd promised Jamie that shopping trip for his new shoes. Maybe it was time to see what else I might discover. Saturday morning arrived with a kind of crisp autumn air that made everything feel possible. Jamie was awake before me, sitting at the kitchen table in his pajamas, carefully lining up his toy cars in order of size. At 7 years old, he had Monica's dark hair and my methodical nature, a combination that resulted in a child who noticed everything but spoke carefully. "Ready for our shopping day, buddy?" I asked, ruffling his hair as I passed by to start the coffee maker. His face lit up with the kind of pure excitement that reminded me why I worked so hard in the first place. "Can we get the shoes with the lights, the ones Trevor has at school?" "We'll see what they have," I said, though I'd already researched the exact shoes he wanted and confirmed they were within budget, assuming Monica hadn't made any more medical purchases. Monica emerged from the bedroom in her robe, looking refreshed despite her late night out with Delores. She kissed Jamie's forehead and gave me a distracted smile. "You two have fun shopping," she said. "Mom and I are meeting Brittany for brunch later. Girl talk, you know how it is." I knew exactly how it was. Brittany Carson was Monica's 32-year-old best friend, a social media manager who documented every meal, outfit, and thought on Instagram. If Monica was meeting with Brittany, it meant she wanted to show off something new. More medical appointments? I asked, keeping my tone light. Monica paused in the middle of pouring orange juice, and for a split second, I saw something flicker across her face. Surprise, maybe, or calculation. No, just catching up, she said. Brittany's going through some drama with her boyfriend. You know how she gets. As Jamie and I prepared to leave, I found myself studying our apartment with new eyes. The living room that had always felt cozy now seemed to showcase Monica's priorities. Expensive throw pillows that cost more than Jamie's entire wardrobe, designer candles that were never lit, fashion magazines that cost $8 each. When had I stopped noticing where our money actually went? The drive to the mall gave me time to think, with Jamie chattering excitedly about shoes and school friends. I found myself remembering the early days of my marriage to Monica, when her enthusiasm for beautiful things had seemed charming rather than concerning. She'd grown up with Delores constantly emphasizing the importance of presenting yourself well and never settling for less than you deserve. At the time, I'd admired Monica's confidence and style, but somewhere along the way, I'd become invisible in my own life. I provided the money, maintained the apartment, handled the practical details, and somehow became background scenery in Monica's Instagram-worthy existence. Even Jamie seemed to sense the imbalance. He always came to me for help with homework, for bedtime stories, for the small daily needs that Monica found tedious. "Dad," Jamie said as we pulled into the mall parking lot, "why doesn't Mom ever come shopping with us?" The question was innocent, but it landed like a physical blow. How do you explain to a 7-year-old that his mother considers spending time with him less important than spending money on herself? "Mom has different interests," I said carefully. "She likes shopping for grown-up things. We get to shop for kid things, which is more fun anyway." Jamie accepted this explanation with the resilience children have for adapting to adult inconsistencies, but I could see him processing it. He was already learning that his father was the reliable parent, the one who showed up, the one who remembered promises. The Riverside Mall was busy for a Saturday morning, filled with families and teenagers and the kind of ambient energy that made everything feel urgent and exciting. Jamie held my hand as we navigated toward the children's shoe store, his excitement infectious despite my preoccupied mood. We were halfway across the main concourse when Jamie suddenly stopped walking. His grip on my hand tightened, and he tugged me toward the side corridor that led to the restrooms. "Dad, quickly, the bathroom," he whispered, his voice carrying an urgency that made me immediately alert. "What's wrong?" I asked as he pulled me into the men's restroom. Inside, Jamie lowered his voice to barely above a whisper and said, "Don't move. Look." He pointed toward the restroom's entrance, and I bent down to his eye level to follow his gaze. Through the gap between the door and the frame, I could see into the main corridor of the mall. And there, walking directly past the restroom entrance, were Monica and Delores. I froze. They were both carrying multiple shopping bags, expensive ones with designer logos and ribbon handles. Monica was wearing a jacket I'd never seen before, something in soft gray wool that looked like it cost more than our monthly grocery budget. Delores was practically glowing with satisfaction, gesturing animatedly as she spoke. But what made my stomach drop was their body language. This wasn't the behavior of women dealing with medical stress or family concerns. They were celebrating. Monica was laughing at something Delores had said, tossing her hair in that way she did when she felt particularly pleased with herself. They looked like women who had just won the lottery. "Is that Mom?" Jamie whispered. "Yes," I said, my voice coming out rougher than I intended. "Why does she have so many bags? I thought she was having brunch with Aunt Brittany." I watched through the gap as Monica and Delores continued past, heading toward the department store anchor at the far end of the mall. Monica pulled out her phone and started taking selfies, posing with her shopping bags like trophies. "Stay here for a minute, buddy," I told Jamie. "I need to think." But Jamie was already thinking ahead of me. "Dad, those are the same bags Mom hides in her closet, the ones she doesn't want you to see." The observation hit me like cold water. My 7-year-old son had been watching and understanding more than I'd realized. He'd noticed the hidden shopping bags, the inconsistencies, the way Monica treated our family like her personal funding source. I pulled out my phone and opened the camera app. Through the restroom door's gap, I could still see Monica and Delores in the distance, now joined by a woman who looked like Brittany. Monica was showing off her new jacket, spinning around while Brittany took photos. "Jamie," I said quietly, "I need you to be very mature right now. Can you do that?" He nodded seriously. "We're going to stay here for a few more minutes, and then we're going to do some detective work, but this has to be our secret for now. Can you handle that?" Like a spy mission? He asked, his eyes lighting up. Exactly like a spy mission. I took photos through the door gap, capturing Monica's celebration with her mother and best friend. The timestamps would show exactly when and where these photos were taken, creating a record that contradicted every story Monica had told me about her activities. As we watched, Monica handed her phone to Brittany and posed for more photos, this time holding up shopping bags like she was advertising them. The joy on her face was unmistakable. This was a woman celebrating a successful shopping spree, not someone dealing with health concerns. "Dad," Jamie whispered, "are you mad at Mom?" The question forced me to examine my own emotions. Was I mad? Yes, but it was deeper than anger. I felt betrayed, manipulated, and profoundly stupid for not seeing the pattern sooner. But underneath all of that was a cold, calculating clarity I hadn't felt in years. "I'm disappointed," I told Jamie. "But sometimes when people disappoint us, it helps us understand what we need to do differently." "Are we still getting my shoes?" I looked down at my son, my loyal, observant, innocent son who deserved better than watching his father be treated like a fool. "Yes," I said, "we're definitely getting your shoes. And then we're going to make sure some other things get handled properly too." We left the restroom and made our way to the shoe store, but I kept my phone camera ready. Every few minutes, I spotted Monica and Delores in the distance, moving from store to store like women on a mission. I documented what I could: timestamps, locations, the growing collection of shopping bags. At the shoe store, Jamie tried on the light-up sneakers he'd been wanting, his face glowing with happiness as he walked around testing them. The shoes cost $68, a fraction of what Monica had spent on her medical tests. "These are perfect, Dad," Jamie said, admiring his reflection in the store's mirror. "They look great on you, buddy. You've been very patient waiting for these." As the cashier rang up our purchase, I found myself thinking about patience. I'd been patient with Monica's spending, patient with Dolores' manipulation, patient with being treated like a walking ATM. But patience without boundaries wasn't a virtue. It was enablement. "Dad," Jamie said as we left the shoe store, "can I ask you something?" "Always." "Why do you let Mom take all your money if it makes you sad?" The question stopped me in the middle of the mall corridor. Other families flowed around us, parents and children engaged in the normal negotiations of weekend shopping, while I stood frozen by my 7-year-old's clarity. "What makes you think it makes me sad?" I asked. "You get quiet after Mom asks for money, and you look at your phone a lot, like you're worried about something. And sometimes I hear you talking to yourself about numbers." I knelt down to Jamie's eye level, there in the middle of the busy mall, and realized that my son had been watching me struggle for longer than I'd admitted to myself. "You're very observant," I said, "and you're right. It does make me sad sometimes." "Then why don't you tell her no?" "Because I love her, and I want to take care of our family." Jamie considered this with the seriousness he brought to all important topics. "But Dad, if she's not sick, and she's spending money on things she doesn't need, then she's not taking care of our family. She's just taking care of herself." The wisdom in his words was devastating. My 7-year-old son had identified the core problem that I'd been dancing around for months. Monica wasn't participating in our family, she was exploiting it. "You're absolutely right," I said, "and I think it's time for Dad to make some changes." We spent the rest of the afternoon at the mall, but it wasn't the casual father-son shopping trip I'd originally planned. Instead, it became a reconnaissance mission. I took Jamie to the food court, positioning us where we could observe the main shopping areas. Every time I spotted Monica and Delores, I documented their activities. By 3 p.m., I had a comprehensive record: photos of Monica in her new jacket, timestamps showing her at various stores during the time she was supposed to be at medical appointments, and clear evidence that yesterday's emergency health expenses had been nothing more than an elaborate shopping spree. "What happens now?" Jamie asked as we walked back to the car. "Now we go home and I do some planning," I said. "But Jamie, this is still our secret, okay? I need to handle this the right way." "Are you going to tell Mom you know?" I thought about Monica's face when she'd asked for money for her medical tests, the practiced concern, the way she'd avoided eye contact. I thought about Dolores' satisfied smile and her comment about me, understanding how to take care of family. I thought about all the times I'd handed over my paycheck without question, trusting that we were partners working toward the same goals. "Yes," I said. "I'm going to tell her I know, but I'm going to do it in a way that makes sure she understands exactly how serious I am." That evening, Monica and Delores returned home with the satisfied exhaustion of women who'd had a successful day. Monica was wearing the gray jacket from the mall, and I noticed she'd gotten her nails done, another expense that hadn't been mentioned in our budget discussions. "How was brunch with Brittany?" I asked. "Oh, you know how she is," Monica said with a wave of her hand. "Drama, drama, drama, but it was good to catch up." She settled onto the couch next to her mother, both of them glowing with contentment. Delores noticed my attention and smiled at me with what I now recognized as condescension. "Monica told me about the medical situation," Delores said. "It's so good to see her looking healthier today. There's nothing like taking care of yourself to improve your outlook." "Nothing like it," I agreed. That night, after Monica had fallen asleep, I sat in our small home office and began organizing everything I'd learned. Bank records, photographs, timestamps, store locations, all of it laid out in chronological order like evidence in a case I was building against my own wife. But as I worked, I realized this wasn't just about Monica's lies or even about the money she'd stolen. This was about respect, about partnership, about the kind of marriage I wanted Jamie to see as normal. And the marriage he was currently witnessing, where one parent worked and sacrificed while the other took and lied, wasn't something I could let continue. I opened a new document on my computer and titled it Return Policy Research. If Monica wanted to play games with our family's financial security, she was about to learn that I could play games too. But unlike her games, mine would have consequences she couldn't charm or manipulate her way out of. The plan that began forming in my mind was simple, methodical, and completely legal. Monica had made choices based on the assumption that I would never fight back, never demand accountability, never treat her actions as seriously as they deserved to be treated. She was about to discover how wrong she'd been. Sunday morning brought the kind of deceptive calm that precedes major storms. Monica slept late, exhausted from her brunch activities, while Jamie and I made pancakes and planned our day. There was something different in the air, a sense of purpose that I hadn't felt in months. "Can we go back to the mall today?" Jamie asked, carefully pouring syrup in a spiral pattern on his pancakes. "Maybe later," I said. "Dad has some errands to run first." Monica emerged from the bedroom around 10 a.m., looking refreshed and wearing the gray jacket from yesterday's shopping expedition. She'd clearly forgotten that I'd never seen it before, or perhaps she simply didn't think I paid enough attention to notice new additions to her wardrobe. "That's a nice jacket," I said casually. "Is it new?" She glanced down as if surprised to see what she was wearing. "Oh, this old thing? I've had it forever. Just haven't worn it in a while." The lie came so easily, so automatically, that I found myself wondering how many other old things in her closet were actually recent purchases funded by my paychecks. "It looks expensive," I observed. "Everything looks expensive to you," Delores interjected from the couch, where she was scrolling through her phone. "Monica has excellent taste. She knows how to invest in quality pieces that last." "Investment pieces," I repeated. "That's an interesting way to think about it." After Monica and Delores left for what they claimed was a quiet Sunday at home, though Delores was dressed like she was attending a country club event, I began my real work. My first stop was the Riverside Mall's customer service desk, where a patient young woman named Tracy helped me understand the return policies for various stores. I explained that I was researching a purchase my wife had made and needed to understand the time frames and requirements for returns. "Most clothing items can be returned within 30 days with tags and receipt," Tracy explained. "Some designer items have different policies, and sale items are sometimes final sale. Do you have specific stores you're asking about?" I showed her the photos I'd taken of Monica's shopping bags, and she identified several stores with generous return policies. More importantly, she explained that most stores could reprint receipts if you had the credit card used for the purchase. "The computer system keeps everything," she said. "As long as the purchase was recent, we can usually help you out." My next stop was our bank, where I requested detailed statements for the past 3 months. The patterns that emerged were startling in their consistency. Every payday, there would be a large withdrawal or series of purchases, usually preceded by Monica mentioning some urgent expense, car repairs, medical bills, family emergencies, or investments in her appearance for job interviews that never seemed to materialize. "Is there a problem with the account, Mr. Granger?" asked the bank representative, a middle-aged woman named Patricia who'd been handling our accounts for years. "Just trying to better understand our spending patterns," I said. "My wife and I are working on budgeting." Patricia nodded diplomatically, but I caught her glancing at the long list of cash withdrawals and luxury store purchases. "Budgeting is always wise. Would you like me to set up spending alerts or account limits?" "Not yet," I said, "but I might be interested in that option soon." The most revealing stop was at Nordstrom, where I presented my credit card and asked for copies of recent receipts. The sales associate, a well-dressed man in his 40s, was initially hesitant until I explained that I was the cardholder and needed the documentation for tax purposes. "Of course, Mr. Granger. Let me pull up your recent purchases." What appeared on his screen made my stomach clench. Monica's shopping spree had been even more extensive than I'd realized. The gray jacket alone had cost $340. There were shoes for $180, a handbag for $220, and several smaller items that added up to another $200. "Your wife has excellent taste," the associate said as he printed out the receipts. "She was here with her mother on Friday, and they were both so excited about these pieces." "Friday?" I said. "Are you sure it was Friday?" He checked his screen again. "Yes, Friday afternoon around 2 p.m. They mentioned it was a special occasion, something about celebrating good news." Friday afternoon? The same day Monica had supposedly spent dealing with medical appointments and test results. The same day I'd been at work, trusting that my wife was taking care of her health, while she was actually celebrating her successful manipulation of our finances. "Did she mention what the good news was?" I asked. "Not specifically, but her mother said something about Ethan finally understanding his priorities. I assumed it meant you'd gotten a promotion or bonus." The words hit me like a physical blow. Delores had been celebrating my gullibility, treating my trust like a victory she'd won. They weren't just spending my money, they were mocking me for providing it. Something like that, I managed to say. That afternoon, I returned to the mall with Jamie, but this time with a specific mission. While Jamie played in the children's area near the food court, I visited every store where Monica and Delores had shopped, collecting receipts and information about return policies. The picture that emerged was damning in its completeness. Monica had spent nearly $1,800 over 2 days, money that was supposed to cover medical expenses, Jamie's needs, and our household budget. But more than the financial betrayal was the emotional one. She'd planned this deception carefully, coordinating with Delores to ensure I would feel guilty enough to hand over money without questions. "Dad, you look angry," Jamie observed as we sat in the food court. "I'm not angry," I said. "I'm disappointed, but sometimes disappointment helps us make better decisions." "What kind of decisions?" I looked at my son, my honest, observant, loyal son, and realized that he deserved to see what accountability looked like. He'd been watching me enable Monica's behavior for months, learning that this was how marriages worked, how families functioned. If I didn't change the pattern, I'd be teaching him that love meant allowing yourself to be used. "The kind of decisions that make sure everyone in our family treats each other with respect," I said. That evening, Monica returned home with Delores, both of them in high spirits. Monica was carrying a small shopping bag from Sephora, apparently unable to resist adding to her collection even on her quiet Sunday. "How was your day?" I asked. "Relaxing," Monica said. "We just stayed at Mom's, watched movies, did some face masks. Very low-key." Another lie, delivered with the same casual confidence as all the others. I'd confirmed with the Sephora sales associate that Monica had been in the store at 3 p.m., spending another $89 on cosmetics while I was researching return policies 3 stores away. "That sounds nice," I said. "Very restful." "Exactly what Monica needed," Delores added. "All that stress from the medical situation, you know. Sometimes retail therapy is the best medicine." The irony of her words was breathtaking. Retail therapy funded by medical fraud, celebrated as self-care while I worried about our budget and Jamie's needs. That night, after Monica had gone to sleep, I spread all the evidence across our small dining table like a detective working a case. Bank statements, receipts, photographs, timestamps, everything organized chronologically to tell the complete story of Monica's deception. But as I worked, I realized that simply confronting Monica privately wouldn't solve the underlying problem. She'd apologize, promise to change, maybe even return a few items to demonstrate her remorse. Then, in a few weeks or months, there would be another emergency, another urgent expense, another reason why I needed to hand over my paycheck without questions. The pattern would continue because Monica had never faced real consequences for her actions. She'd learned that I would always forgive, always provide, always choose peace over accountability. And Delores had encouraged this dynamic because it served her interests too. She got to enjoy the benefits of Monica's spending while maintaining the moral high ground of family loyalty. I opened my laptop and began researching something I'd never thought I'd need to understand: the legal and practical aspects of financial boundaries in marriage. What I learned was both empowering and sobering. As Monica's husband, I had the right to control access to accounts I funded. I could require transparency about purchases made with our shared resources. And if Monica had misrepresented the purpose of money she'd requested, that could be considered a form of fraud, even within a marriage. More importantly, I learned about something called financial abuse, and realized that what I'd been experiencing was actually a recognized pattern of manipulation and control. Monica's behavior wasn't just selfish or immature, it was a systematic exploitation of my trust and resources. But the most valuable thing I learned was about leverage. Monica's shopping spree had been funded by deception, but the items she'd purchased were still returnable. The stores had clear policies about fraudulent purchases, and they had the authority to demand returns when purchases were made under false pretenses. If I handled this correctly, Monica wouldn't just face private embarrassment, she'd face public accountability. The same stores where she'd celebrated her successful manipulation would become the venues where she'd have to acknowledge her deception and make restitution. I closed the laptop and looked at the evidence spread across our table. Tomorrow, I would begin phase 2 of my plan, building an airtight case that Monica couldn't charm, manipulate, or lie her way out of. She'd taught me that trust without verification was just enablement. It was time for her to learn what accountability actually looked like. Monday morning arrived with the crisp efficiency of a business day, and I approached it with the same methodical mindset I brought to complex technical problems at work. The difference was that this problem involved my marriage, my son's future, and my own self-respect. I dropped Jamie at school with the usual routine of backpack checks and lunch money, but his goodbye hug lasted a little longer than normal. "Dad," he whispered in my ear, "are you still working on the spy mission?" "Yes, buddy, and it's going very well." "Good," he said with the serious nod of someone who understood that important work was being done. At the office, Patrice noticed my improved mood immediately. "You look different today," she said as we set up our workstations. "Less defeated." "I'm working on some personal projects," I said. "Problem solving, you know." "The kind that involves Monica and Delores?" "The kind that involves setting better boundaries." Patrice studied my face with the same analytical approach she used for troubleshooting network issues. "Ethan, can I give you some advice from someone who's been through a divorce and came out stronger?" "I'm listening." "Whatever you're planning, make sure you have documentation for everything. People can lie about conversations, but they can't lie about bank records and receipts. And make sure you're not just solving the immediate problem. Make sure you're solving the pattern." Her words confirmed what I'd already begun to understand. This wasn't about recovering the money Monica had stolen, though that mattered. This was about establishing that our marriage would operate on principles of honesty and mutual respect, or it wouldn't operate at all. During my lunch break, I visited a family law attorney named Gerald Hutchinson, whose office was located in a professional building downtown. I'd found him through online research, specifically looking for lawyers who specialized in financial disputes within marriages. "Mr. Granger," he said as we settled into his office, "tell me about your situation." I presented the evidence I'd gathered: bank statements, receipts, photographs, and a timeline of Monica's deceptions. Attorney Hutchinson reviewed everything with the thoroughness of someone who'd seen similar cases before. "This is quite comprehensive," he said. "You've documented a clear pattern of financial deception. In legal terms, your wife has been obtaining money under false pretenses, which could be considered a form of fraud even within a marriage." "What are my options?" I asked. "Several. You could pursue formal legal action, though that tends to be expensive and time-consuming. You could demand restitution through mediation, or you could handle this privately, using the evidence as leverage to establish new financial boundaries." "What would you recommend?" Attorney Hutchinson leaned back in his chair, considering his words carefully. "Honestly, the most effective approach might be to create consequences that match the behavior. Your wife has been treating your shared finances as her personal shopping fund, with no accountability or transparency. The natural consequence would be to remove her access to those funds until she demonstrates she can be trusted again. And legally, I can do that. As the primary earner whose paychecks fund these accounts, yes, you have the right to require transparency and honesty about how your income is spent. You also have the right to demand restitution for money obtained through deception." He handed me a business card and a pamphlet about financial abuse in marriages. "Read this tonight. If you decide you want to pursue formal legal action, call me. But Mr. Granger, sometimes the most powerful response to manipulation is simply refusing to enable it anymore." That afternoon, I made one more crucial stop: the mall's customer service office, where I requested a meeting with the general manager, Dennis Alcott. I'd researched Mr. Alcott online and learned that he'd been managing retail operations for over 15 years, with a reputation for taking fraud seriously. "Mr. Granger," he said as we sat in his office overlooking the main concourse, "how can I help you today?" I presented my evidence: the bank record showing the fraudulent medical expense claim, the receipts from stores throughout the mall, and the photographs of Monica celebrating her successful deception. "Your wife obtained money from you under false pretenses, then spent that money at stores throughout this mall," Mr. Alcott summarized. "And you have documentation proving the deception." "Correct. And I'm hoping you can help me understand what options the stores have when purchases are made with fraudulently obtained funds." Mr. Alcott studied the receipts and photographs with the attention of someone who dealt with various forms of retail fraud. Well, technically, if money was obtained through deception, then purchases made with that money could be considered fraudulent. Stores have policies about accepting returns for fraudulent purchases, and they can require full restitution, even if the items have been worn or used. Especially then, when customers misrepresent how they obtained funds for purchases, stores have the right to demand returns and refunds, regardless of the condition of the items. It's a matter of maintaining the integrity of our business relationships. He handed me a folder containing return policies for every major store in the mall. Mr. Granger, if you decide to pursue this matter, I'd be happy to coordinate with our store managers. We take fraud seriously here, and we support customers who've been victims of deception. What would that process look like? You'd present your evidence to the relevant store managers, along with a request for mandatory returns and restitution. Given the documentation you have, I believe most stores would cooperate fully. They might even be willing to waive their usual return restrictions, given the circumstances. As I drove home that evening, I felt a sense of clarity I hadn't experienced in months. The legal system, the retail policies, and basic principles of accountability were all on my side. Monica had built her deception on the assumption that I would never fight back, never demand transparency, never treat her actions as seriously as they deserved. She was about to learn how wrong she'd been. That night, Monica and Delores were in particularly good spirits, apparently planning another girls' day for later in the week. I listened to their conversation with new ears, hearing the casual entitlement and the complete absence of concern for our family's actual needs. "Ethan," Delores said during dinner, "Monica was telling me that Jamie needs new clothes for school. You should probably set aside some money for that." The irony was breathtaking. Jamie did need new clothes, but the money that should have covered his needs had been spent on Monica's gray jacket and Dolores's accessories. Now they were suggesting I should provide additional funds to solve a problem they'd created. "How much do you think Jamie's clothes will cost?" I asked. "Oh, probably $400 or $500, Monica said casually. "Kids grow so fast, and you want him to look nice at school." $400 or $500, exactly what Monica had spent on her own shopping spree, not including the larger purchases. She was suggesting I should provide more money to solve a problem created by her theft of money intended for exactly this purpose. "That seems reasonable," I said. "Let me check our budget and see what's available." After Monica and Delores had gone to bed, I finalized my preparations. The evidence was organized, the legal groundwork was established, and the retail policies were clear. Tomorrow, I would begin the final phase of my plan, but first, I had one more conversation to have. I knocked softly on Jamie's bedroom door and found him reading under his covers with a flashlight, a habit that reminded me of my own childhood. "Dad?" he said, quickly hiding the flashlight. I wasn't reading late. "It's okay, buddy. Can we talk for a minute?" He sat up in bed, giving me his full attention with the seriousness he reserved for important conversations. "Jamie, tomorrow some things are going to change in our family. Mom might be upset, and Grandma Delores might be upset too. But I want you to know that everything I'm doing is to make sure our family is honest and fair with each other." "Is Mom in trouble?" he asked. "Mom made some choices that weren't honest, and now she needs to fix those choices. Sometimes when people make mistakes, they have to make them right, even if it's embarrassing or difficult." Jamie nodded thoughtfully. "Like when I broke Mrs. Peterson's window and had to use my allowance to pay for it." "Exactly like that, but bigger because Mom is a grown-up and she should have known better." "Will you and Mom get divorced?" The question hit me like a physical blow, partly because I hadn't fully considered that possibility, and partly because my 7-year-old was already thinking about it. "I don't know, buddy. That depends on whether Mom is willing to be honest and fair from now on. But no matter what happens between Mom and me, you and I will always be a team. That will never change." Jamie hugged me tightly, and I realized that whatever happened tomorrow, I was doing it as much for him as for myself. He deserved to see what accountability looked like, what respect looked like, what it meant to have boundaries and enforce them. "Dad?" he said as I tucked him back in. "Yeah?" "I'm proud of you for standing up for our family." As I closed his bedroom door, I realized that my son had been watching and learning from my passivity for months. Tomorrow, he would start learning different lessons about self-respect, accountability, and what it meant to refuse to be treated as less than you were worth. Monica had taught me that trust without verification was just enablement. Tomorrow, I would teach her what consequences actually looked like. Tuesday morning dawned with the kind of deceptive calm that precedes seismic shifts. Monica was in an exceptionally good mood, humming as she prepared coffee and scrolling through social media posts from her weekend shopping adventures. She'd posted several photos of herself in the gray jacket, tagged with captions like, "Treating myself because I deserve it," and "Self-care Sunday vibes." The irony was perfect. She'd documented her deception on social media, creating a permanent record of her celebration while I'd been believing her lies about medical expenses. "You seem happy this morning," I observed. "I feel great," Monica said, not looking up from her phone. "Sometimes you just need to invest in yourself, you know? It makes everything else fall into place." Delores arrived while Monica was getting dressed, letting herself in with the spare key she'd never been asked to return. At 55, she moved through our apartment with the confidence of someone who considered it an extension of her own territory. "Morning, Ethan," she said, settling onto our couch with her oversized purse. "Monica and I are meeting Brittany for lunch today. Girl time." "More retail therapy?" I asked. "Maybe a little," Delores said with that satisfied smile I'd learned to recognize. Monica's been so stressed with her health issues. She deserves to enjoy herself now that the worst is behind her. The casual reference to Monica's fabricated health crisis was delivered with such practiced sincerity that I almost admired the performance. Delores had elevated enabling into an art form, always ready with justifications for Monica's behavior and criticism for anyone who questioned it. "I'm glad she's feeling better," I said. "Those medical tests must have been a real relief." "Oh, they were," Delores agreed. "Dr. Kellerman said everything looked perfect. Monica's health is excellent." Another lie, delivered without hesitation. There had been no Dr. Kellerman appointment, no medical tests, no health crisis, just a carefully orchestrated deception designed to extract money for a shopping spree. After Monica and Delores left for their lunch, I began the final preparations for what I'd come to think of as the reckoning. I called in sick to work, the first time I'd used a personal day for anything other than family emergencies, and spent the morning organizing my evidence into a presentation that would be impossible to deny or deflect. My first stop was the bank, where I met with Patricia, the account representative who'd helped me understand our spending patterns. "Mr. Granger," she said as we reviewed my account, "I have those spending alerts and account controls you asked about. Are you ready to implement them?" "Yes, but I want to do something else first. I need to understand exactly what options I have for controlling access to accounts that I fund." Patricia walked me through the process of establishing spending limits, requiring dual authorization for large purchases, and setting up alerts for any transaction over a specified amount. More importantly, she explained that, as the primary account holder, I had the authority to temporarily freeze access while investigating potentially fraudulent activity. "If you suspect that someone has been using your accounts for unauthorized purchases, we can place a hold on all cards and require in-person verification for any transactions," she explained. "How quickly can that be implemented?" "Immediately. I can make the changes right now, if you'd like." I thought about Monica and Delores at lunch, probably planning their next shopping expedition, confident that I would continue to provide funding without questions or consequences. "Let's do it," I said. My next stop was the mall, where I'd arranged to meet with Dennis Alcott and the managers of the stores where Monica had made her fraudulent purchases. The conference room overlooked the main concourse, and I could see shoppers moving between stores with the casual confidence of people engaging in legitimate commerce. "Mr. Granger," Dennis said as we settled around the conference table, "I've briefed our store managers on your situation. Everyone here is prepared to support you in addressing this fraud." The store managers, representatives from Nordstrom, Sephora, the boutique where Monica had bought accessories, and 2 other retailers, reviewed my evidence with professional attention. They'd all seen various forms of fraud before, but the systematic nature of Monica's deception seemed to surprise them. "This is quite comprehensive," said Janet, the Nordstrom manager. "Your wife not only misrepresented how she obtained the funds, but she documented her deception on social media. These photos show her celebrating the purchases she made with fraudulently obtained money." "What's our next step?" I asked. "We'll need you to bring your wife and her mother here tomorrow," Dennis explained. "Present the evidence in our presence and request immediate returns and restitution. Given the documentation you have, we'll support your request fully." "What if they refuse to cooperate?" "Then we'll treat it as a formal fraud case," Janet said. "We have security footage of their purchases, receipts showing the transactions, and your evidence proving the money was obtained through deception. They'll cooperate." The certainty in her voice was reassuring. Monica had built her deception on the assumption that I would never escalate beyond private confrontation. She'd never considered that her actions might have legal and public consequences. That afternoon, I made one final stop, a meeting with Attorney Hutchinson to finalize my legal position. "Mr. Granger," he said as we reviewed my documentation, "you've built an airtight case. Your wife obtained money through deception, spent it on luxury items, then lied about her activities while documenting them on social media. Any reasonable person would consider this fraud. And I'm within my rights to demand restitution? Absolutely. In fact, you'd be within your rights to pursue formal charges if she refuses to cooperate. But given the evidence you have, I suspect she'll choose cooperation over public prosecution. He handed me a folder containing legal precedents and a template for a restitution agreement. If you decide to formalize this arrangement, these documents will protect your interests and establish clear consequences for any future deception. That evening, Monica and Delores returned from their lunch in high spirits, carrying small shopping bags that suggested they'd made additional purchases. Monica was wearing new earrings that sparkled in our apartment's lighting, probably another investment in herself, funded by our joint account. "How was lunch?" I asked. "Wonderful," Monica said. "Brittany is doing so much better with her boyfriend situation. And we found the cutest little accessories at that new boutique near the food court." More lies, delivered with the casual confidence of someone who'd never faced consequences for deception. Monica had become so comfortable with manipulating me that she'd stopped being careful about her stories. "New earrings," I observed. "These old things?" Monica said, touching the clearly expensive jewelry. "I've had them forever." Delores nodded in agreement. Monica has such a good memory for her jewelry. She knows exactly what she owns and when she bought it. The irony was breathtaking. They were lying about new purchases while sitting in our living room, surrounded by evidence of their deception, confident that I would continue to enable their behavior indefinitely. "They look expensive," I said. "Everything looks expensive to you, Ethan," Delores said with that condescending tone she used when she felt I was being unreasonable. "Monica deserves nice things. She works hard, and she's been through so much stress with her health situation." The reference to Monica's fabricated medical crisis was delivered with such practiced sincerity that I almost admired the performance. Delores had turned enabling into a moral crusade, always ready to justify Monica's behavior while criticizing anyone who questioned it. "You're absolutely right," I said. "Monica deserves exactly what she's earned." After Monica and Delores had gone to bed, I sat in our small home office and finalized my preparations. Tomorrow would be the culmination of everything I'd learned about accountability, consequences, and self-respect. I opened my laptop and composed a text message to Monica. "Meet me at the Riverside Mall tomorrow at 11 a.m. Customer service desk. Bring your mother. We need to discuss some financial matters." I stared at the message for several minutes before sending it. Once I pressed send, there would be no going back. Monica would face public accountability for her deception, or she would face formal legal consequences. Either way, the pattern of manipulation and lies would end tomorrow. I pressed send. Within minutes, my phone buzzed with Monica's response. "What's this about? Is everything okay?" I typed back, "Everything will be fine. Just bring Delores and meet me at 11 a.m. "Ethan, you're scaring me. What financial matters?" "We'll discuss it tomorrow. Get some sleep." I turned off my phone and went to check on Jamie, who was sleeping peacefully in his room, surrounded by the toys and books that represented his simple, honest world. Tomorrow, he would start learning different lessons about accountability and self-respect. Monica had spent months teaching me that trust without verification was just enablement. Tomorrow, I would teach her what consequences actually looked like. The reckoning was 12 hours away. Wednesday morning arrived with the crisp clarity of a day that would change everything. Monica woke up anxious, checking her phone repeatedly and asking questions I refused to answer. "Ethan, please just tell me what this is about," she said as she got dressed, her voice carrying an edge of panic I'd never heard before. "We'll discuss it at the mall," I said calmly. "Make sure you bring your mother." "Why does Mom need to be there?" "Because she's part of the conversation we need to have." Monica tried several more approaches. Tears, anger, bargaining, accusations that I was acting crazy. But I maintained the same calm demeanor I brought to complex technical problems. This was simply a problem that needed to be solved, with all the relevant parties present and all the evidence clearly presented. Delores arrived at 10:30 a.m., clearly briefed by Monica about the mysterious meeting. She entered our apartment with the aggressive confidence of someone prepared for battle. "Ethan, what's this nonsense about financial matters?" she demanded. "Monica is worried sick, and frankly, your behavior is completely inappropriate. Married couples discuss money privately, not in public places." "We'll discuss it at the mall," I repeated. "I don't have time for games," Delores said. "If you have something to say it now." "At the mall," I said. 11 a.m. Customer service desk. The 15-minute drive to Riverside Mall was conducted in tense silence. Monica sat in the passenger seat checking her phone and occasionally glancing at me with expressions that ranged from confusion to fear. Delores occupied the back seat like an indignant queen, radiating disapproval at what she clearly considered my unreasonable behavior. I parked near the main entrance and led them through the mall toward the customer service desk, where Dennis Alcott was waiting with several store managers. The sight of the assembled group made Monica stop walking. "Ethan, what is this?" she asked, her voice rising with panic. "This is a conversation about honesty and accountability," I said. Dennis Alcott stepped forward with professional courtesy. "Mrs. Granger, I'm Dennis Alcott, the mall manager. Your husband has brought some concerns to our attention, and we'd like to discuss them with you." "What concerns?" Delores demanded, positioning herself protectively next to Monica. "What business is it of yours what happens in their marriage?" "When fraudulent purchases are made at our stores, it becomes our business," Dennis said calmly. I opened the folder I'd been carrying and placed the first set of documents on the customer service counter. Bank statements showing the $2,000 withdrawal Monica had requested for medical tests, followed by receipts from stores throughout the mall showing how that money had actually been spent. "Monica," I said, my voice calm and clear, "you told me you needed $2,000 for medical tests. Instead, you spent that money on a shopping spree. You lied to me about where you were going, what you were doing, and what you needed the money for." Monica's face went pale as she stared at the evidence. "Ethan, I can explain." "I'm sure you can," I said. "But first, let's make sure we have all the facts clear." I placed the next set of documents on the counter. Photographs I'd taken of Monica and Delores at the mall, timestamps showing when they were taken, and screenshots of Monica's social media posts celebrating her purchases. "These photos show you and your mother shopping at the exact time you were supposed to be at medical appointments," I continued. "And these social media posts show you celebrating your successful shopping trip, wearing clothes purchased with money you obtained through deception." Janet, the Nordstrom manager, stepped forward with her own folder. "Mrs. Granger, our sales associate remembers you and your mother quite clearly. You mentioned that you were celebrating good news and that your husband had finally understood his priorities. You were referring to successfully manipulating him into giving you money under false pretenses." Monica looked around the group of store managers and mall officials, clearly realizing that this wasn't a private marital dispute she could charm or manipulate her way out of. This was a formal fraud investigation with witnesses, documentation, and consequences. "This is ridiculous," Delores said, but her voice lacked its usual authority. Monica had every right to buy herself nice things. Ethan makes good money, and wives deserve to be taken care of. "With honestly obtained funds," Dennis said, "when money is acquired through deception, purchases made with that money are considered fraudulent." I placed the final set of documents on the counter. Return policies for every store where Monica had shopped, legal precedents for fraud within marriage, and a restitution agreement prepared by Attorney Hutchinson. "Here's what's going to happen," I said, addressing Monica directly. "You're going to return every item you purchased with the money you obtained through deception. For items that can't be returned because they've been worn or damaged, you're going to reimburse me the full purchase price. And you're going to do this now, in front of these witnesses, as acknowledgement that your behavior was fraudulent." "Ethan, please," Monica said, tears starting to form. "We can discuss this at home. You don't need to humiliate me like this." "I'm not humiliating you," I said. "I'm holding you accountable. You chose to commit fraud. You chose to lie to me repeatedly. You chose to celebrate your deception on social media. These are the consequences of those choices." Monica looked around desperately, clearly hoping someone would intervene on her behalf, but the store managers and mall officials maintained their professional neutrality. This was a straightforward case of fraud, documented thoroughly and witnessed by multiple parties. "The gray jacket," Janet said, consulting her records. "You're wearing it now. That was purchased with the fraudulently obtained funds, so it needs to be returned immediately." Monica's hands went to the jacket she was wearing, the expensive wool coat she'd lied about owning for years. I can't just take it off here." "Actually, you can," Dennis said. "We have a private office where you can remove the items that need to be returned. But they do need to be returned today as part of this restitution agreement." For the next 2 hours, Monica and Delores were escorted through the mall, returning items and providing restitution for purchases that couldn't be returned. The gray jacket, the new shoes, the handbag, the accessories, all of it handed back to store managers while I documented each transaction. The most devastating moment came at Sephora, where Monica had to return makeup she'd already used, paying full restitution while the sales associate she'd bragged to watched in professional silence. "Mrs. Granger," the Sephora manager said as she processed the return, "our policy typically doesn't allow returns of used cosmetics, but given the fraudulent nature of the original purchase, We're making an exception. However, you'll need to pay the full purchase price as restitution." Monica handed over $89 in cash, her hands shaking as she signed the restitution receipt. Delores, who had been largely silent during the return process, finally exploded as we finished at the boutique where she'd purchased accessories with money she'd encouraged Monica to obtain through deception. "This is insane," she shouted, loud enough to attract attention from other shoppers. "Ethan, you're destroying your marriage over a few $100s. Monica is your wife. She deserves nice things." "She deserves what she earns honestly," I said calmly, "and she deserves the consequences of her choices. What about forgiveness? What about love? What about supporting your family?" "I've been supporting my family," I said, "but I won't enable fraud, and I won't teach my son that love means allowing yourself to be lied to and stolen from." The final stop was the customer service desk, where Dennis Alcott presented Monica with a comprehensive restitution agreement documenting every returned item, every cash payment, and every acknowledgement of fraudulent activity. "Mrs. Granger," he said as Monica signed the document with a shaking hand, "this agreement establishes that you obtained money through deception and used it to make fraudulent purchases at stores throughout this mall. By signing this document, you're acknowledging your actions and agreeing to the restitution terms." Monica signed her name, tears streaming down her face, while Delores stood beside her in stunned silence. "There's one more thing," I said, pulling out my phone. "Monica, you posted photos on social media celebrating these purchases. You need to delete those posts and replace them with an acknowledgement that the purchases were made with fraudulently obtained funds." "Ethan, please," Monica whispered, "don't make me do that." "You chose to make your deception public," I said. "Now you need to make your accountability public." With shaking hands, Monica deleted her celebratory posts and typed a new message. "I need to apologize for recent posts celebrating purchases I made with money obtained through deception. I'm working to make things right and be more honest going forward." She posted the message and handed me her phone to verify it had been published. Dennis Alcott handed me a copy of the completed restitution agreement. "Mr. Granger, this matter is now resolved from our perspective. Mrs. Granger has returned the fraudulently purchased items and provided full restitution for items that couldn't be returned. The total amount recovered is $1,847. I looked at Monica and Delores, both of them pale and shaken by the public accountability they'd never expected to face. For months, they'd treated me like a walking ATM, confident that I would never demand transparency or consequences. They'd built their relationship on the assumption that I was too weak, too accommodating, too desperate for peace to ever fight back. "Thank you," I said to Dennis and the store managers. "I appreciate your professionalism and support." As we walked back through the mall toward the parking garage, Monica and Delores were completely silent. Other shoppers moved around us with the casual confidence of people engaged in legitimate commerce, while my wife and her mother processed the reality of facing consequences for the first time in years. At the car, Monica finally spoke. "Ethan, what happens now?" I looked at my wife, the woman who'd promised to be my partner, who'd chosen deception over honesty, manipulation over respect, and fraud over trust. "Now you decide whether you want to be married to someone who expects honesty and accountability," I said, "because that's the only kind of marriage I'm interested in." Monica and Delores got into the car in stunned silence, their faces pale with the reality of public humiliation they'd never expected to experience. They'd learned that actions have consequences, that fraud has penalties, and that love without respect is just exploitation. As I started the car, I realized that my 7-year-old son would come home from school to a very different family dynamic. He would see that his father had refused to be treated as less than he was worth, that accountability mattered more than false peace, and that sometimes love required the courage to demand better. The reckoning was complete.